All right. Hey there, and welcome to Customer Value and Beyond. I'm Stephen Lewandowski, and every Wednesday at 5 p.m. CET, I want to spill some insights I've gathered from 25 years in tech, B2B SaaS, and customer success, in also team building. Today, I'm joined by someone who's not only mastered the art of delivering customer value, but also has another secret passion. He's got a great sense of humor, which apparently doubles as a superpower in B2B SaaS, and once wrote a so-called rocket ship. We'll be tackling your burning questions, exploring the latest industry buzz, and unlock fresh ways to create genuine value for your customers. Come in, share your thoughts, and let's keep growing and learning together, and without taking ourselves too seriously. Let's get started. And enough about me and the show. Now I'm excited to introduce the real star of today's show, which is Jim Smith. Jim, why don't you jump in and share a bit more about who you are, what you do, and maybe a fun fact we won't find on your very impressive LinkedIn profile.
Well, thank you, Stephen. I'm very honored to be here. I'm Jim Smith. I'm Director of Customer Success, open to work currently, leveraging skills in team building, revenue operations, and SaaS metrics for organizational growth. I'm a leader with a proven ability to streamline processes, enhance team performance, and deliver measurable results. I'm passionate about coaching, innovation, and building systems that empower teams to excel through scalable frameworks and operational efficiency. And that's what my LinkedIn profile says. And every time I read it, it actually kind of makes me want to vomit in my mouth, Stephen. But thank you for having me.
I loved it. I was very impressed. I almost blushed a bit, I think.
Can you imagine like if you walked up to somebody in a bar and introduced yourself to that person or like your friend, like you'd have no friends. You'd have zero friends. Like nobody talks to anybody that way. So I'm kind of amazed why and that stuff's on my LinkedIn profile. And I think I'm going to change it immediately as soon as this thing is done, because I think I threw up a little bit in my mouth as I as I spewed that out. But yeah, it's weird. It's odd to me.
I just realized and remembered something that happened to me forever ago when I met an old friend, and he basically started an introduction like that. And imagine, I knew him many, many years before that and just re-met him. And he was starting working for one of these insurance companies, which have some kind of like a snowball system where they try to find other people that sell the same insurance, right? And to others. And this intro and this reconnection felt exactly like that.
Was it like multi-level marketing? Like if you just get 5 of your friends and they get 5 of their friends.
Exactly. And imagine just knowing someone forever and then you re-meet them in a bar and just see that and just
Oh,
realize, okay, I'm talking to a
I would
completely
laugh in
different
their
person. Yeah.
face. I would laugh in their face. Maybe give them a hug or something, buy them a drink.
Yeah. Perfect. And by the way, yeah, Sally already provided a feedback for you. So she was surprised about the intro for a sec, but loved the ability to laugh about yourself. Yeah, you're in for a treat. Jim is an expert in that. Perfect.
You said I
So
was an
how much of
expert in
that is
something
serious?
else. I forget what it was. Like you gave me some kind of like critical acclaim. I was like,
Yeah, there
oh
was
man.
also something about a rocket ship and customer value. Choose one, which you love more.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, mastered customer value. Oh my goodness. Yeah, if I did that, I'd actually be living in the house, the fake house behind me. This is the house I aspire to own. It's nothing like my current house.
Oh
So
my. I think your green screen is way too good, so I really believe
yeah,
that's the house. Yeah.
yeah. No, I have a keyboard, but not a piano. Something interesting about myself. I don't know, man. And I shared this is funny. Like when I had changed roles in my previous job, like I went through a different role in my team. They gave me a bunch of stuff, and the reason why they gave me this stuff is like and I've shared this because I don't care. Like I love taking bubble baths. Like so I get in there, I light a candle, put the lights down low, I put Netflix on, I get the bath salts and the bubble bath, and like once a week, I kind of just like that's my alone time. Kids are like knocking on the door, they want to go to the bathroom, they have to go to the downstairs bathroom because it's dad time taking bubble bath. So I don't know if that's fun
Nice.
or interesting, but I like taking bubble baths, Steven.
To be honest, I can't find anything bad about it because we also have a I have a nice bubble bath, and we have also, you probably have too if you watch your iPad during a bubble bath. You have these wooden like tables which you can pop up and then put your iPad on it and then just
Yeah.
enjoy uh, another of these 1,000 TV
Yeah.
shows. Um, nice. No,
And
I can remember that.
if you're
Yeah.
just joining, welcome to the Bubble Bath Hour with Stephen and
Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah. Jim is an expert on bubble baths. So if you have any questions on that, please feel free to add them to the comment section. And what should I say? And click here to follow, subscribe, and
Yeah,
find Jim. Yeah.
something like that. I don't know.
So another one. So maybe something you started with that with the bubble bath section. Is there something else on your LinkedIn profile or something missing on your LinkedIn profile where you would say, okay, this is maybe a fun fact or maybe something that would surprise people?
Yeah, I don't know if it's fun or surprising, but I like to dig holes. Not to like put people in or anything, but if you think about it, like what is more, first of all, like you ever dig a hole? Like it's the best exercise. Like it's a great core exercise, arm exercise, shoulder, legs, what have you, especially if you like start hitting rocks. But anything like there's so few things where you kind of like tangibly can look at something at work and be like, I did that. And that's why digging a hole is great because there was no hole and now there's a hole. But I don't just like have a bunch of holes around my yard. Like I fill them with stuff. Like I redid my whole yard, and like I can point to every shrub and bush that's out there, and I planted. Like I dug a hole, I planted a little shrub, and now you get to see that thing kind of grow and mature and sprout into something. Like what is more satisfying than that?
I love that. I love that so much. And I can so much relate with that fact of seeing stuff develop and be finished, right? So, because I think in our line of work, you're oftentimes in for parts of the journey, you're in for a start of a process or to improve something and see parts of the journey, but you probably in many cases don't see it finished till the end, right? And so I have to admit, I have two palm trees on my terrace, right, which I raised and which um, I think look at way too often and see how they how they turn out, almost like my own kids. So I think sometimes they might be a bit jealous about that. And because we have family in Florida, so I'm a bit in love with palm trees, and so I needed something here during the gray cold days, which you surely have too in Boston. Remind me of summer. And regarding the tasks at hand, for me, it's not digging holes. For me, it's actually the dishwasher and vacuuming. I don't know why, but I love it when I vacuum my own place and the whole apartment, and I take probably forever and just see afterwards that it's finished. And probably for a few days, I'm happy with it. Same for dishwasher. In the evenings, I don't know, sometimes listening to nothing and just putting everything in the dishwasher and emptying it. I love it. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Yeah, man. Mission accomplished, right? You started with a dirty
Absolutely
floor and
done.
now it's not
Yeah.
dirty. Yeah, absolutely. Like there's
Exactly.
satisfaction and just like crossing stuff off the list, getting stuff done. And that's what they
Yeah,
said, like start with like, isn't there books about making your bed in the morning? Like done, made my bed, right?
absolutely. And I think some people might already have a suspicion. So whoever's listening and thinking, okay, what's maybe a strange or unexpected skill that we can put on Jim, or something that helped you along the way on your journey so far, where you thought, okay, that kept me going, that helped me through some situations. What would you think that would be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you
Digging holes,
mentioned
probably
it.
not.
No, just go to the office and start like digging holes in the floor. No, I mean it's sense of humor and beyond just like sense of humor. Like it took me a while to really just like figure out what I'm good at and who I am and really get comfortable in my skin. I think like there's this weird thing that we do, and this going back to like my corny LinkedIn profile. Like there's this persona that we put on at work. I don't know. And when we get within the four walls of like our office, our home office, like we put on like this cloak and it's just like a totally different persona. And I think for me, it took me a hard time to like figure out like what draws people to me. And when I reflected on that, it was like, well, people like, I'm a fun guy to be around, I think. Right. I have a good sense of humor. I think that's what draws people to me. So when I was actually able to apply that, I was able to just kind of like be myself and let my guard down. And I've learned so much from just watching comedy. Like I love watching comedians and comedy. Like if you watch the best comics, I think there's a lot to learn from them. Number one, like they command an audience. Like I know they're there solo on a stage, so you have all eyes focused on you. But if you stink and your material's not good, your timing's not good, people are going to lose interest, right? You'll bomb. So if you watch comedians, like watch how they engage an audience. Listen to like their cadence, how they deliver a message. You know what I mean? There's some that kind of speed through things, but they're like super engaging and they work at a pace that the audience can typically follow. And like beyond anything, what I learned is the power in just being silent, being able to say something and just let it sit there and marinate and not feel the need to like jump in and say more. So if you think about those skills, like they're super transferable to any part of business, especially like if you're in customer success, you're customer facing. All right, how do I command an audience? How do I stay interesting? How do I actually create content that people can easily consume and follow that's relatable? And how do I just give the conversation room to breathe? So for me, it's sense of humor and just watching a lot of comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also like a comparable there's a common denominator, I think, for both leaders and but also expert roles and comedians in a way which might be uncommon, but in a way of being authentic. And this comes back to
Yeah.
your to what you said first, right? About this, we put up this persona, and well, social media, no matter if it's personal or business networks, right? They have their own little, I don't know, way how things work. But in practice, in your company, and I think this is also why we got along and have been in touch for so many years, it's usually you stick around with the people that are authentic, that in their role, in their understanding as a manager, as an IC, as an executive, or whatever, kind of are familiar with their role and can identify with that, right? And can really live up in that role and found that niche in which they can really strive. And I remember when we met, so Jim was one of the very first key hires we hired for the US office during Signavio times. And I remember you basically, with your persona itself, you basically were like this lighthouse for the whole team, right? And you were the IT department, the customer success manager, the professional services consultant, and I think you also did the pre-sale support with a few of the colleagues earlier in the days. And I think this just makes up for one, for long lasting relationships, and also for the credibility which you need also in interaction with your customers, right? And really feel like, okay, there's really somebody that's authentic and that really wants to help me also be the best version of myself and push that forward.
Well, it's interesting you say that, right? And I was able to figure that out within like a work environment. So like internal employees, colleagues. And before I came to Signavio, like I had some experience being customer facing, but not like at scale, not like that's like my everyday. So like I figured that out how to do that with colleagues. But when I got on with customers, I put on the cloak again. And um and at the time I was reporting to the VP of sales, and this person like was really good at their job. They were good at storytelling, good at doing discovery. And when I needed help, so in other words, like I got off a customer call and I went to him or somebody else, I would say, hey, I got this customer, here's the situation, what have you. And they would ask me a bunch of questions about the customer, and I didn't know the answers. And the reason I didn't know the answers is because, you know, I was scared to really be myself and to really, and when you're not yourself, you stop being inquisitive, you stop being curious, right? And I had this fear of being wrong. So when people used to say things, I'm like, well, they're saying that, they must assume that I know what they're talking about. And if I ask questions, I'm gonna seem stupid, like I don't know what I'm talking about. And the opposite, and people don't think that way. I found that out. And the opposite was true. So like I would go to internal stakeholders and be like, here's the situation. They would ask me questions. I didn't know the answer. So now I had to go back to the customers, like, and get their time. So I'd wasted their time previously and my time, go back and now ask the questions and get the information. And and I just realized, I'm like, well, wait a second, like what am I doing here? Right. And when I realized, like, when you just are inquisitive and ask questions, like people don't care. People want to tell you, like they want to share what's going on in their world. So even though I was able to do that internally when I came to Signavio, it took me a little time to actually be able to apply that to customers. and customer engagements.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense, right? But this is also an example of how this, I think, often comes to fruition, because this oftentimes, at least how I witness it, happens when people already have a certain way of being humble about themselves and also humble about their impact, right? And understanding, okay, I'm a wheel in a machine, and this machine has to work well, right? And for this, I need collaboration. I need to share information. I also need to get information, and I also need to be open to think in terms of a greater good, right? And I won't go into politics or any bigger topics, right? But this is something which sometimes nowadays we lack, right? So not just looking at your own interest and the own impact you can have, but seeing, okay, if I collaborate with a few people, what's the best impact we can have all together? And I think this also shows in hiring decisions, because it's often being said that you should hire people who are more experienced than you, or who are better than you in any way or fashion, or more experienced than you. But I've done it actually quite a few times, and I know how challenging it is in the beginning, because it's also sometimes something that intimidates you a bit, right? Because if you get somebody in who's way more experienced than you, it might be intimidating if that, I don't know, is that person replacing me, or is that person impressing my boss more than I'm able to, right? But in the end, if you understand how you can work with them and learn from them and think in the better good for the company, I think that's super valuable. And I honestly fear that although it's being said a lot, in practice, it's not done a lot to hire people that are more experienced than you, especially in early startups and scale ups, where you just need great people who stick around, have an entrepreneurial mindset, and stick around for a while.
Yeah, and I want to address that, but I thought of something as you were talking, as it pertains to kind of just like being yourself or having this fear of being incorrect. At some point, and like I don't know when that aha moment was for me, but I was always like I used to work at a company where it was like all MIT grads, and they were like software developers, and it was intimidating. I'm like, MIT, prestigious, they know all these things. At some point, and I don't know when it was, and like, listen, I'm not saying there's not smart and brilliant people out there, but I think I was giving folks a lot more credit for being like smarter than me. Not that I'm the most brilliant guy in the world, but once I realized that most people are kind of just, I don't want to say full of crap, but most people are kind of just winging it and trying to figure it out, right? Just like most of us, that put my mind at ease. Or I'm like, well, they're not like necessarily smarter than me, and they're not more experienced than me. Like they're trying to figure this thing out just like I am. And I think when you come to that realization that for the most part you're on a level playing field, then it helps eliminate, I don't know if it's called imposter syndrome or whatever, but kind of that fear of being wrong. And as far as you had mentioned, like, experience, or having somebody more experienced come in, and I don't know if you're saying like take your job or what have you, but yeah, it's tough because like I'm looking for a job right now, right? I'm currently unemployed, and I have this whole LinkedIn persona, and I went and tried to tailor my resume for the job that I'm looking for, and then I go and modify the keywords like just to get me past that initial screening. But like, how do you measure those kind of like intangibles? Like, how can you get in front of somebody and have these types of conversations to say like, hey, people might actually like working with Jim or Steven because they're authentic, and not only that, they're experienced, and this goes beyond just what's on a resume. And the thing, I don't know if you like American football, right? I don't know if you know a lot. I know you're from Germany. You're more of maybe a kind of a soccer slash football guy. But there was so back in, I think it was like the 90s, there was this guy, his name was Mike Mamula. He went to Boston College. In the combine, I don't know if you know the NFL combine, that's where like scouts and coaches go to go and evaluate players. And something that was kind of in vogue at that time, or was pretty new, I would say, was all these like measurables for these players. Like, how much do you bench press 225 pounds? How high can you jump? How fast can you run a 40? What's your 3-cone drill look like? And I don't know if it was like his agent or somebody figured out like, all right, if we can just put together like a regimen based on these intangibles, your draft stock can like go through the roof. And not to say like your vertical jump is going to go up that much in like 3 months that you have to prepare, but let's actually train based on these measurables. And like, he's like, his numbers were off the charts, right? And his draft stock went way up. I think he got picked by the Philadelphia Eagles and he was like a top 10, top 5 guy, but I don't think he had like this great career in the NFL, but they fell for it. Like all these measurables that he hit, everybody fell in love with it at the time and he got drafted high. But, how do you measure the things that, what do they call that? The intangibles. Like, how do you measure somebody's grit? How are you going to know if like somebody is actually going to, remain calm under pressure? Like those things that really you can maybe figure out a little bit in like conversations like this. You're not going to figure that out from a resume. A resume is not going to tell you. Hopefully, like you have conversations like this and you get references that speak to that, but you never know until you're in those situations. So I don't know what like this all amounts to. I just know that it's kind of it's kind of tough out there trying to like get past, what this job market and present yourself in the best light by also but being authentic as well.
Absolutely. And especially in recruiting and in interviewing, I think this becomes apparent, right? Because especially if you have, let's say, a very structured and guided interview process, I believe the more people can prepare for something very specific, like special courses or certifications and exams, the more people will just prepare for this focused thing, right? Like with kids, when they have an exam or a test for school and they know exactly kind of which 3 pages to learn, they will probably be great at that. But ask them some background questions, right? How that came to be, or some background information, they will probably not be able to tell you about that. So I think that's super helpful. And
Uh,
I know for a fact about you that with me and an SVP I just talked to last week, you have two people that if they would be hiring, they would hire you immediately.
oh,
One
well,
of
that's
what?
between that and the money I earned this week, I got $0.
Yeah, we're working on that. So we're getting there. Speaking of that, and maybe coming back to also some of the points in your career. So you've
Mhm.
worked in some incredible companies. One I've personally known quite a bit and spent many years with. What in your career were maybe the biggest like moments where you thought like, could somebody maybe pinch me and tell me that this is for real? And I can't believe this is actually my job, right? Did you have a situation like that?
Yeah, I don't know if it pertained to like the work I was doing specifically, but it was the situation at a company. And this was so my previous job, I worked at Freshworks. I came in at 2019. I started as a customer success manager, then, moved myself into a leadership role. But what I heard, leading up until I got hired at Freshworks was that, it was a company that was looking to go public. And you mentioned rocket ship. Like this is, I just want to digress for a second. Like think about this. We tell people that they're part of a unicorn company that's on a rocket ship. And people get excited about that. Think about how ridiculous that is. Like if your kid came to you and be like, "Hey, Daddy, I'm on, I'm a unicorn and I'm on a rocket ship." You'd be like, "Oh, that's nice. You are a mythical horse with a horn on a fake rocket ship. Like that's cute. You have such a wild sense of humor." And like this is what we tell people and they get excited about. I don't know if that's still the case, but I was part of the rocket ship and I had
Oh, it
never
was not a
I
literal rocket ship. Sorry, I thought you were in a real rocket
no, it
ship.
was. No, yeah, we beat SpaceX. We were first to Mars and it's very little known. Yeah. No, it was, the unicorn on the rocket ship. Um, but yeah, so I was part of that and so it was the first company I had equity with. I never had equity with a company. So I had RSUs, restricted share units, and I didn't know much about it. I just know that, hey, if the company goes public, these things vest over 4 periods and you get some money. But when you talk about like my kind of spidey senses tingle whenever you say like rocket ship and unicorns because it's utterly ridiculous. So like when we actually announced that we were going to go public, like we were waiting and waiting, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're going to go public in September 2021. So it's like exciting, and it's unfortunate because it was like kind of on the back end of COVID. So like some people got to go to New York and they were at the Nasdaq and all that stuff. And if it had been different times, and maybe I wasn't at the Nasdaq, but I could have went and celebrated with them. But we got to watch virtually. So like you see this thing unfold, and then you see like your RSUs. actually get converted into like stock at a clip of 10 to 1. So like if you had 1,000 RSUs, now you have 10,000 shares. And then you see what that is potentially worth, right? Because you can't sell it right away. And we IPO'd at like $40 a share. So like I'm looking at my E-Trade account, I'm like, holy crap. And that's a lot of money for me. And then the stock went way down. And then I realized like when you actually get RSUs, you don't get all of those RSUs because, you know, they take a portion of it to pay for taxes. And then I learned about all the taxes I had to pay. So listen, it was like kind of this, I don't know, a dream experience, but a unique experience for me that was awesome that I went through that you know, I'll always cherish. But that was my moment where I was like, all right, is this thing real? And then when it happened, you're like, oh crap, this thing is real and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, always great to hear about these experiences, right? Because especially if you work for, I don't know, especially US companies that already are on the stock market, right? Or if you compare that to startups, right, that might have some VSOPs, ESOPs, or something like that. It's not comparable, right? And having been in a startup, but also in a publicly traded company or two, actually, it's yeah, it's a very different ballgame. And especially the tax topic. Once you learn about that, you know, okay, actually they share a few of sell a few of my shares every year. So okay, good to know. Okay, so maybe talk about a bit of a trending topic, right? So being in the tech space and loving the tech space quite a bit. AI is everywhere right now, right? So, and where would be one thing, and I think we have to talk about AI, where you think AI is capable of doing it brilliantly, and where's one thing where you think it maybe shouldn't yet be trusted?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what I use it for. Um, you know, what it's capable of. I don't know. I don't know if you've seen Terminator. You know, maybe that's the end game here. Hopefully not. I don't know. You know what I
Hope not.
mean? But I mean, hey, listen, I think it's brilliant at, you know, it really reduces time on like doing any kind of like research, especially like in customer success. Like you want to research a company, what have you. The stuff that's, you know, kind of public information that would take you like a lot of Google searches to figure out, like it can summarize it for you. Writing, you know what I mean? And not that I let it write for me, but you know, I have an idea and I prompt it based on the situation and it gets the writing started and then I can tweak it as we go on, whether that's a resume or like I'm writing an email to a customer or what have you. A summarizer, you know what I mean, especially like for analytics. And like before I left Freshworks, um, I was working on this project. Like we had this dashboard that had, you know, like customer data, and we wanted to figure out like how people are using it and to what like efficacy they're using it. So before we went off and tried to like improve it, I'm like, let's survey like the customer success organization. So, you know, we created a form with a survey, you know, how are you using it? What kind of problems can you solve? And then I went and put that in. I'm like, I made this nice like Canva infographic, like looked really awesome. Like I was really proud of it. And then I was writing like this summary, like I had everything in a Google Sheet. I started building like a dashboard of all that data to summarize it for people. And I don't know, I think somebody just goes like, why don't you just like anonymize it and plug it into like Chat GPT and get a summary that way? I'm like, well, that's smart. Why didn't I think of that? So like I'm spending all this time trying to summarize all this data and I plugged it in. And you know, I validated it and I looked at it, but it saved me so much time in just like summarizing like all these responses I got from a survey. So and in coding as well, like I can understand like JavaScript and you know, like I wrote some Google app scripts in my last company. But I'm no coder. Like if you give me a blank canvas and say like code in Python, JavaScript, what have you, I'm gonna be like, what? How do you do that? But like there was automations that I built creating like Google app scripts where I would just prompt ChatGPT and go back and forth with it and create like what effectively is an app that,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I could have done it like Googling stuff. I wasn't going to learn like Google app script to the point where like I can code on a blank canvas. And maybe I could have done it, but it would have took me forever. And not that it like took me like, I don't think I got the first answer and like it was done. Like it took a lot of back and forth, but I would say I would have given up on that if I had done it any other way. But I was able to like build apps by just prompting ChatGPT about my situation and what I'm trying to do. So like I think it's a great starting point. Like the hardest thing in most stuff is just to get started. I can't help you physically get started, but if I want to start like an idea or a thought, like let me prompt it, let me get started with something, and then I can run with it. But research, writing, summarization, coding, for me, like it's a big time saver.
Yeah, and I think remembering back, I think you were actually quite actively engaged with our workflow tool back in the day, with also adding scripts and learning how the workflow tool
Yeah,
works.
love
So I
creating
think this
workflows.
is nowadays you most of the time you don't need much more, right? For very sophisticated deep tech stuff, right? Or where it's really about like creating some um, for example, workflow tool from scratch, right? That's hardcore coding, but there are so many platforms out there which allow you to build SaaS applications, which allow you to leverage workflows for that, right? So I think, especially in that matter, you can do quite a bit nowadays without being technically a coder, right? You can script a bit, you understand the workflow and the process. I think the hardest thing, as you mentioned, is really understanding what are you trying to build and how does the user experience behind it work, right? And understand how can I guide a user and how can I make sense of this, and not have just a beautified spreadsheet in the end, which I could use Google Spreadsheets for. Yeah.
Well, and that's what I would do. Like I would go back. So I would, get the code, put it in, test it. And, I was just doing all the testing pretty much myself, but I would figure something out. I'm like, oh, wait a second, that's not quite right. Or this user experience could be better.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, chat GPT, this was great job. But, I want to, like I was created an app where like it sent like Slack messages as reminders and stuff, and they can click on buttons and it would go like up to the spreadsheet, what have you. I don't want to bore you with the details, but I would go back and find little things like, all right, how can I create a more like, you know, better consume message in Slack? Well, you can use Slack Blocks Kit, and here's an example of Slack Blocks Kit and what it looks like. I'm like, all right, I want a button here, and I want this image here, and it was great. Like it was, it doesn't, it's nice. It's very polite too. One time I got mad and I think I said something like off color to it. And like it wrote back to me. He's like, oh, they're like, cut it out, like stop, like that's not nice. In so many words, like it was like super polite. But yeah, ChatGPT is the politest person you'll ever speak with.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you use the voice functionality, right? And this is also always very funny when you see people like talking to their phones in a very natural way. Then you can imagine that they're
Yeah.
talking to Gemini, GPT, or something like that.
Yeah, and I'm not
So
just shilling for ChatGPT. Like that's the one that I happen to use. I know there's a
yeah,
lot of other like LLMs out there that people prefer, but that's the one that I've always used.
yeah, no worries. We don't have any paid ads yet or anything. So,
No.
so if you speaking about tools, so if you could invent a tool or a platform or anything that doesn't exist yet, right? So, what would it do? What would be a tool that would solve a challenge for you, which no tool as of yet is solving?
Yeah, I have two.
Hmm.
So the first one is called Slap. SLAPP, like app with an SL in front of it. So what it is so think about like artificial intelligence, like something that you can plug into maybe like a Gong that's conversational AI, or plug into like Zoom. And what it does, it detects stupidity. And whenever it detects stupidity, it goes and it gives you like a virtual slap, right? Like, hey, cut the crap. And then there's like an add-on you can buy, which is like a spring-loaded like hamburger helper hand that you can like mount on your monitor, and then you can actually like invoke that with actually like physically slaps you across the face when it detects stupidity. Or maybe it detects like if anybody starts introducing themselves like I did at the beginning of it, like boom, like slap some sense into you.
I'm not
And
sure I'm sold yet because who defines what that would be? Because I imagine whoever programs it, this might decide that I might get the
well,
occasional
yeah, you
slap.
can do like so just like anything else, like you can any kind of like settings, like do you want it to like aggressively look, or you can kind of have like a bar that says like do you want to like how lenient do you want to be, or how like strict do you want to be. And maybe like you can do like a manual, you can turn it off, you know what I mean, to like the automatic setting. You have a manual setting, and you have like a Roman Coliseum, like thumbs up, thumbs down with like the group where they can vote where somebody gets slapped. I'm not advocating for violence, by the way, and
Got
these
it.
are all
No, no,
jokes, so
obviously not.
nobody like upset. But
So were these the both products already, hardware and software, or is there another one?
yeah, so you get like the AI thing that plugs into like all
Got
your
it.
conversational AI stuff. And then if you want, there's an add-on, which is the spring-loaded hamburger helper hand that actually can go, and you make it like foam so it doesn't hurt you. And you can even do that.
Got
Like,
it.
do you want something that's firmer? Maybe like, like maybe from like on a scale of like wooden paddle to maybe like soft, feathery pillow.
Got it.
I actually
Okay.
have another app if
Oh,
you're
yes.
interested.
Yes,
Okay.
please. Share.
Yeah. This one might be a little bit more serious. I'm actually serious about this one. I think it's something that we can use. I'm half serious about the Slap app, but yeah. So we're always trying to. So we talk about customer value, right? And that's sometimes like a hard thing to quantify. But it's ultimately like goals are the North Star for our customer. And really customer goals ultimately should be aligned with what our products are purposely built to do, right? There
Yeah.
should be some alignment there. So if you think about something that like ingests customer goals from day one, and I know like, you go out, prospect, you do discovery, you jot it down, it's in the CRM. But by the time it like gets to the customer success team, who knows, was that passed down? The sales team's using the CRM, the onboarding team's using some kind of onboarding program, customer success is using a CSP, or they're using Google Sheets, or who knows, right? Those things kind of get lost in translation, diluted or just missing completely. But what if there was something that was predicated on like a value framework? So let's say we're able to build a value framework. We have our business outcomes that align with value drivers, that align with feature functionality, that align with the metrics that speak to the results that they're getting, that correlate with those outcomes, right? And when you do discovery, we put in our customer goals. So number one, like, do our customer goals actually align with what our products are purposely built to do? Like, we should be able to like draw that connection to try to get a sense of like their success potential, right? And shout out to Lincoln Murphy. Like, success potential is not a thing I invented. Like, he created it. I believe in it. I think it's hard to figure out and scale, but I believe we should try to figure that out, like for right fit customers. Um, but like something where it sits in there, right? And then it determines if they're a good fit for your product based on their goals. And then ultimately can create like a success plan based on their budget, their resources, their skill set. Right. And something like that is then like revalidated during onboarding and implementation. Right. It's fed into like the customer subscription. Like, it should be omnipresent with the customer as well as like the internal stakeholders, like the sales team, the onboarding team, the marketing team, the customer success team, right? That thing should be omnipresent and out there. It should be like this is our North Star. Is it aligned with the product that you purchased, right? And then once they start using it, okay, what is the data telling us, right? And the data can be baseline against like other customer data, right? And then ultimately, like, if you can even pull in like more data, like industry, like benchmarks and standard, now we have something to go on to say like, hey, you're doing great, or hey, not so good, right? And you can segment it into like industry verticals or customer size or whatever the case may be. But something where from inception, you have customer goals, see if it aligns with what your products are purposely built to do, right? And then we can go back and make suggestions. We can course correct. We can prompt the customer success team, be like, hey, this customer is getting off track for these reasons. Let's go in and intervene and see if we can get them back on track. And let's also model what successful customers look like so we can emulate that behavior with other customers and give them actually some like good guidance in terms of what to do. I have no idea how to build this. Like, I'm not an engineer. Like, it's easy for me to just spout these things, but fundamentally, like, when you talk about value, I think about results, and there should be that thing that we're constantly tracking and measuring from day one.
And I think that's first super important. And sorry for everybody listening. It took us a while to get to the customer value topic. So Jim and I had to catch up a bit. But I think this customer value topic is super important. And I think many are falling into the trap of talking about like these strategic goals and the strategy behind why they're buying your tool, because it's first, oftentimes tough to admit that your tool might not be strategic, right? Your tool is maybe just a convenience to have. It's nice for the employees. There is a certain impact. So you have to first understand what kind of impact am I measuring, right? So is there any data that you mentioned, right? Something where I can measure what does the tool show us, what's successful, which also needs to be something which is important to the customer, right? So also a trap you fall into quite quickly is looking at internal metrics where you might talk to your product team or your engineering team or your management team and say, okay, here's some usage metrics which are going up, which must be great, but your customer might not care about that, right? So for them, it might not be a metric they're actually interesting to. So you have to understand what's the outcome they're interested in. And this outcome doesn't need to be strategic, right? It could be, I don't know, we're replacing a communication tool, or we're leveraging a new workflow tool, or we're using something where we see, okay, from the data perspective, this is successful and we have a certain outcome we want to follow. And then maybe the third piece would be understanding what's the business case, right? What is the business value you're generating, right? And if we ask you, how would your manager or everybody's talking about the CFO, man, oftentimes it's not the CFO. How did the person that approved the budget for the software, how would that person be convinced that this is of value to your company, right? And how would you measure that? And if your customer has a hard time translating that, this is kind of where you need to get to, right? Translating that, what impact are we having and how does that translate into business value? And this is where which you mentioned, these customer value frameworks come in, where you need to understand, okay, what's the outcome and how can I tie that to the business value your customers are generating? And in that aspect, you talk to numerous customers about their value, their generated value, their impact. What was maybe the funniest value or the most the most memorable value topic you discussed with a customer where you thought, okay, that's either interestingly operational or ridiculously strategic, as I would call it. So do you have an example of that?
Yeah, I don't know if I have an unusual definition per se, but I mean, I'll give this example. Sometimes customers get hung up on certain functionality that may not seem important and kind of creates friction between CSMs and product managers. There's like, hey, my customer really wants this, and it might not be a big deal for like the product team. So here's an example, like when my time at Signavio. So I went over to Berlin. I flew over to Berlin, and we were in the courtyard there behind Signavio, and people were having their smoke breaks. And I was talking to Till Reader. I'm sure you know Till, right? Love
Roger
Till.
Till.
A
Yeah.
big rangy guy, like kind of like an unassuming guy, but great guy, right? So I go and start talking to him about a customer who wants to change like the font size and color on like a specific part of the product, right? And yeah, I know, exciting stuff, right? So I'm telling him, I'm like, yeah, I'm like the attributes on these things, like they want to change the font and color size. And Till's like, Jim, like, are we really talking about font sizes and font colors? Like, I go, Till, do you think I like flew over here because I want to talk to you about this? I'm like, this is very uninteresting to me as well. But ultimately, like the customer's putting something into the software and they can't read it, right? So yeah, we can talk about font colors and sizes, but ultimately, like you're gonna be able to like read what you're putting in there. So really, the use case was about readability and being able to do that. And if the font is like this and the contrast isn't very good, then they can't see it. So what's it really worth? But I don't know, just kind of like just an anecdotal example of just something where it just seems so trite, but it mattered to that customer. Yeah, and there's like other
But
examples of that.
I challenge that a bit. So looking at the value they're generating, right? And we oftentimes, and this is also something which somehow bears on heavy on some customer success teams out there. We're kind of fixing, translating, and working around things that might not work in product, right? Where these things should technically be done by product. And I was attending an event a few months ago where we actually planned a session for that, right? Where we said, okay, let's have a session around what would customer success be if product solved most of the customer success challenges. It would not have any product insufficiencies which might need a workaround. The value would be clearly articulated, and it would be clear, okay, what's the value I'm getting? I'm guided through to that value, and I also have a report here where my management team can get a report and understand the business impact. So I think this is oftentimes where we see we're caught in very transactional, very operational topics around the product, around challenges and kind of the interactions with our product. But what we actually want to get to is the real value we're generating. And I think sometimes what helps is kind of trying to translate it like you were talking to either a child, right, or someone who doesn't know anything about the business you're in. And sometimes, to be honest, it's also when I'm at a family event and I try to explain to people, okay, what are you actually working on? You want to become a programmer, right? Or you were in information systems somehow. And then I try to explain what I'm actually doing nowadays. How would you describe that value topic to someone who might not be familiar with it, or I don't know, might be in the kindergarten?
Yeah, I mean, I think you try to make it as simple as possible, so as if you're speaking to a child, right? And I don't think that's demeaning, and I don't think that's patronizing, but like it's it's hard. It's easy to make things complex. It's hard to make things simple. Look at my LinkedIn headline and about me, right? Complex. Can't wait to change that when we're done here, by the way. Yeah, so all right, how do you do it talking to a child like a 5-year-old? All right, so imagine you trade one of your cookies to your friend for a scoop of ice cream. That ice cream makes you feel so happy because it's yummy, you want it more than the cookie. So that happiness that you feel about getting something better than you gave up is like customer value.
Impressive. Now I think about cookies. Sorry, I'm distracted.
Can I
Great,
I
great
don't
insight.
I want to ask you, Stephen, because I know we might not have time for it. Can I touch upon like the whole customer value thing when it comes to like product usage just quickly? I'll try to be like real
Yes,
brief.
please. Yes, please.
All right. So I think one thing that we have to do better at in just as a business, right? Whether you call it customer success as a group or as a concept is, we're so interested about asking the customer goals and what have you, and that's good, right? We shouldn't stop doing that, but like we need to be more intentional and prescriptive in terms of what our products are able to do. Like customers are looking at us as the experts. So I think we need to do a better job of telling them what they can do, right? Ask them what they want to do, but telling them what they can do and being more prescriptive. And that's why adoption is a kind of a slippery slope. When I hear like, yeah, improve adoption, I'm like, well, what if, let's say I hired you as a personal trainer, right? And on day one, you were like, all right, Jim, my goal is to use every piece of equipment in the gym. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, that's what you're going to do. You're going to use every piece of equipment. And I'm going to keep track of all the equipment you use, right? I'm not going to keep track of whether you're using it right or what have you, but like, I'm going to keep track of every piece of equipment. And I come back like a month later and I look at it. I'm like, oh no, your gym membership is at risk of churning because you only used a third of the equipment in there. I don't know if you're using it right. I don't know if you're reaching any of your goals or what have you. So I just wanted to comment on why I think it's important, where we need to get better at just being prescriptive and being the experts and telling our customers what we think they should do. Also keeping in mind their goals and see if that matches, but not get so hung up on adoption, right? Because adoption is not the end goal. It could be a means to an end. But here's a perfect example. My 12-year-old daughter worked out with me the other day, and she was doing all the same exercise I did, and it was time to do squats, and she can't do a squat to save her life, right? So if I asked her, like, how many squats did you do? Like, yeah, I did like 50 squats. If you look at her squats, like they were brutal. They were horrendous. Like she got no value out of doing those squats. Like we have to correct her form. No, she's like, doing squats like this, bending at the waist, right? Her legs aren't going to get stronger. She's probably going to have a bad back, but hey, she did 50 squats. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
just be careful in that. Like when you're looking at as adoption as kind of like a metric to measure people. And I think we just need to get better overall at being more prescriptive.
Absolutely. And I had a few occasions where I talked to either senior managers, executives, and they asked, or they said something in the way of mentioning, oh, we do business reviews now, or we started doing them 6 months ago, and I think we should be set now, right? So we make sure we have all the strategic stakeholders and executive sponsors, and everybody's there. We try to get the CEO and the CFO in there, and we should be good now, right? And then you start asking some questions like, okay, first, why should the CEO or the CFO join if your tool might be just some nice to have, right? It's not, doesn't have any strategical impact, a strategic impact on the customer's company, or and somehow even worse, or it might feed into that, you don't have like a defined, I always call it value journey, right? That you have implemented. So your sales team in doing value selling is not documenting the case they created for the customer, or maybe they didn't do it at all, right? Worst case, no MEDPIC or MEDIC implemented at all, or it's just lost somewhere. And this is the most cases I see, that the information is lost on the way from sales to what comes after. I absolutely by choice don't necessarily talk about customer success, because after that there could be onboarding, there could be professional services projects, right? Tools are very different and are very differently complex, and this is why I always try to look at the specific company to kind of decide what we're going to talk about. But somehow this needs to be carried through the company. And I also don't really like the term handover, handoff. I know it's common, right? And we need to talk about it somehow, but technically you don't want to have that. You want to have like a value journey where something is put ideally into a CRM system or the system of choice, single source of truth. And this is just carried along for eternity, right? It's
or my fake app
customers
that I invented
yes,
today.
absolutely. And customer success and marketing and professional service, and everybody can access it, because it makes a huge difference if your tool onboarding is a video, an e-learning course, and a click on let's start, or if my professional services team is visiting your site for 3 months to conduct projects and customer interviews and all that stuff to just get it starting, right? So, and especially for this, if you went through very complex B2B tools, you understand how complex projects are, how much information is exchanged, how many stakeholders are in place. So I think these best practices don't necessarily translate that easily. So I think it's super important to understand before you do some business review, and it took me a while to get here to that response, to do these business reviews, you need to have something to talk about, which is interesting to your customer. So if you prepare your nicely prepared slide deck, and I'm actually quite sad that sometimes in 2025 we still talk about it, and on that deck you prepare some adoption metrics and your NPS and I don't know, some other information.
Let me tell you about my company.
Why?
Yeah, we
You mean
started in
flat?
2008 and we did this and did that. That's exciting, right?
Yeah.
Enough about you.
Exactly.
Let's talk about me.
And then take 10 minutes explaining to them what they bought from you, right? So, and you have these licenses and this blah, 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 right? So, which, yeah, we shouldn't be talking about this anymore. So really understand the impact and what you're having. So looking into the future a bit and also looking at the time a bit, because I also want to let you go, because for you, it should be lunchtime soon, I guess. Let's talk a bit about the future, right? So looking at, well, most of us are in B2B SaaS. Most of us are somehow in a B2B environment. Mentioning again, this is not just focused about customer success, right? So there are some people in the pipeline for the show also, which are from the product area and some other interesting areas. But looking at B2B SaaS, so looking into the future, and I think looking at the last 2 years with the rise of AI, or however you want to put it, things have changed quite a bit. Looking at B2B SaaS in 5 years, what would you think will be differently? Will there be some big changes? Will it look completely different? Is there still B2B SaaS in 5 years? What do you think? So, Jim, predict the future, please.
Yeah. Let me put my thing on. Who's the guy in PB Herman with the?
Yeah,
I forget his name. Anyway, the green guy. I think what we'll see, and you've seen this a little bit, and I think it's easier to do in some businesses than others, is go to like consumption-based pricing models, especially for like AI, because AI on the back end is expensive. So I don't know how you do it, like replace like a named user license with consumption based. Is it like how many records you create depending on the software? But like anything that's transactional, things like, if you start using like virtual agents that are querying like large language models, like there's a cost to that. And I think we're going to pass those costs on to customers. So I think you see a lot of more consumption-based transactional things like connecting apps, what have you. Named user stuff, you would have to like really be buttoned up in like your infrastructure in order to do that. But I think you'll see more and more consumption-based pricing models. As far as, customer success, I don't want to do this to kind of sound like salacious. Like I don't want to do it for clicks. Not that I'm looking for it, but I kind of hope like the customer success role goes away. And let me explain that because I'm an
I think
unemployed
we just lost the whole audience.
customer. I'm an unemployed customer success person looking for a gig. So let me explain. Listen, the customer needs don't go away, right? It's still important that they get tangible results from our products and services. Like that's still there. Like somebody has to go and, make everybody aware of our brand, go and sell the product, get them interested, capture their goals, like implement it, see that they're successful using the products. Like those needs don't go anywhere. But I think, we've kind of created this customer success role as, I don't know, it's kind of evolved into this like Frankenstein thing where it becomes a catch-all. So I would like to see kind of like a more pragmatic and common sense approach. Like, all right, how do we tackle this? Right. So maybe we have customer success managers that stays, but how do we look at this holistically as a company in order to do all of these things? And I think we do them in silos, but we don't tend to do that holistically. And I'm painting with a broad brush here. I'm not saying everyone, but like, there's not a lot of continuity that I've seen, in doing that and holistically as a company. So whether that means, and customer success is always going to exist as a premise, as a need, but maybe we just don't do it with a customer success organization, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think customer success is usually also an easy target, right, for discussions, for misalignment and arguments about it, right? Because the one thing that was missing, although there were many people that drove this discipline to where it is nowadays, there's no real definition of it, right? So you can have a customer success team which is more of a supportive role, right? Very
Mm.
reactive, somehow supporting a software, not even mentioning the complexity of the tool, right? And the necessity how it should be onboarded, right? So that's maybe the first angle. Second one would be a very salesy team, right? And there's also already a big difference if you look also at LinkedIn, at the community between US and German teams, right? US teams were always way more revenue focused, way more measured also on revenue impact than it was, especially in DACH and in Europe. And then the third angle would be very consultative teams, right? So teams that might have a consulting background that are very focused on doing projects, doing services, and really making everything, which is probably most aligned to the value topic we have today, really making sure that you see value in the tool. And I think the future and the truth is somewhere in the middle, that much of what customer success managers had to do for the last decade was due to tools not doing something right or documentation missing and things like that, which I think will be quite accelerated through AI, through being able to create content quicker with less people, create e-learning courses and all of that stuff much quicker and with smaller teams. But the third angle, this being very consultative, being very guiding through the tool and helping you with, I don't know, change management, if you like the term or not, helping drive that, right? And helping
Mm.
with the adoption. I think this is really where it could be going. But this will also be something where you might need more senior customer success, customer value, customer outcome folks who are actually able to drive that at a company. So looking at this, I think this guides maybe good into our last question because we're at the top of the hour also. What kind of roles would you see there, looking at that future, right? Looking
Mm.
at how customer success might evolve. What would for you be one area where this could lead to?
Yeah, so I think we touched upon it a little bit earlier. We talked about like value frameworks. I think like value engineering, like if there's, obviously you need the kind of the visionaries, the strategic folks to kind of figure that out in terms of like, again, like what is your product purposely built to do and how do we quantify value? And then you need like the technical folks to go and build those models. Like if we can build like large language models that speak to customer value for your product, that also bring in like industry benchmarks, like that would be huge, right? That'll be huge. And I think what you might see is like the evolution from like a customer success manager. And I don't know if we're just rebranding it, right? I hope not, but I hope we actually go towards this is like customer value managers or customer outcome managers, like people that are really in tune with, the results that customers are or aren't getting and are well equipped to go out and then give prescriptive guidance on how customers can get better results, more results, faster results from products and services.
Absolutely. Love it. And funnily enough, I just had a call today with someone where we also discussed that idea a bit. And we also discussed that maybe there will be the chief value officer at some point, right? Which is responsible for the impact generated, for the outcomes in customer success, customer services, who guides the product into a direction where the value will be generated, and to make sure that this is also mentioned in the marketing material, on the website, in the company vision, right? So if someone wants to brainstorm that idea, I'm very open for that. And I would love to be, well, maybe there is one, but I would love to be the world's first chief value officer at some point. I would love that role. Sounds great.
You need someone
So
smarter than me, Stephen. Let's start there. Smarter than me.
exactly. But maybe that's your new role, right? Maybe there's somebody on the call right now, or somebody that will look at the recording, because I know from the US time this is right during the day, right? So that we'll see the recording and we'll say, hey, Jim will be my next chief value officer. So yeah,
Oh
let's
boy,
get his rocket ship and
God
let's
help
dig
us
some
all.
holes and let him get there. Alrighty, Jim. I think that's a wrap for today. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
And we will be sharing the hell out of this video. And thanks for the conversation. Thanks for your insights on customer value, on your personal growth, on the impact you had on me, on our teams that we work together, and obviously many more people. So thank you for your time. Any last things you want to share with the crowd? Anything you want to share?
No, we're good. I'm
We're
gonna end
good.
on a medium
Perfect.
note. I don't
Then
know if it was a high note, but we'll end on a note that isn't me fumbling around with some more words. Thanks, Stephen. I had a good time.
thank you, Jim. Thank you
All
so
right.
much. And see you next time. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye.